All right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for listening in, whether you're listening to this live or later. I wanted to thank you all for subscribing. It's now 20,000 and counting. So let's get to 100,000 soon. Spread the word. Now, there's a few things I want to go over. If you have any questions, just leave a super chat and I'll get to your question in the end. And what I'll just discuss now is what we have planned over the next couple of months, or basically for the rest of the year. So we might have a course on the philosophy of health that's about to be submitted to me. In any event, I will teach a course on Heidegger on technology, 6 weeks in total. And that's a new one. There's another one on Heidegger on cybernetics and technology. But for this one, we're going to read different texts. You can now head over to the Halcyon Guild website, which is here. So this is, you can download the syllabus here. I might make a change. I haven't decided yet. I might change one of the readings. But for now, this is what we're going to read. So I can just tell you briefly what we're going to look at. We're going to read, of course, we're going to begin with the question concerning technology, die Frage nach der Technik, where we'll try and understand what it is that Heidegger is actually after. Because Gestell, and framing as it's usually translated, as the quote-unquote essence of technology, or as I like to say, rather than the essence, it's the realm of techniques in which things or beings appear in a certain way, which is as standing resource, standing ready without resistance for use and exploitation, etc., including the human being, who has a peculiar role to play because we are the executors, as it were, the managers of Gestell. So this is happening in mid-October. If you download the syllabus now, then we'll email you in September for early enrollment. So you can sign up. Usually those courses fill up quickly, and then so the last time I taught Heidegger on technology was almost 4 years ago. Yeah. So if you do want to take this course, get the syllabus now. Link is in the chat here. And I'll reach out to you once we open early enrollment, because I'll have your email address so I can let you know. And again, if you have questions, leave a super chat and I will get to you in the end. So in the meantime, again, thank you very much for subscribing. If you know anyone who's interested in philosophy, share videos of mine with them and the channel in general. And always also mention, please, my Halcyon Academy. And if you haven't done so yet, maybe it's time you sign up for a course. For example, the most recent one, which is Goethe's Faust. And don't forget, there's a coupon. So there's 20% off for a couple of days until Sunday with the following code. It's 20K. That should be easy enough to remember. So use the code 20K, for example, to head for the Faust course. Yeah. What else do we have? So I'm going to go over some of my courses. The first one I ever taught at Halcyon was a course on leisure with dignity, otium cum dignitate, on Cicero, Nietzsche, Wilhelm von Humboldt, Heidegger, Josef Pieper, and even Bertrand Russell, if you believe it, who wrote this nefarious essay in praise of idleness, which seems so harmless, but which, as a matter of fact, isn't at all, because what he's proposing here is that we live in a technocratic utopian future where we basically live off you, and then we can have quote unquote idleness again, but only then. It's quite striking that he had the same idea as his friend John Maynard Keynes at around the same time. They all propose around the same timeline. It would be in 100 years from now. So those 100 years are now over. And as someone recently pointed out, the more John Keynes forgot how important credit creation is for the economy, which is, it means that banks create money out of thin air, out of nothing. Banks, not central banks, banks. Yeah. Central banks are privately owned anyways. But in proportion to that, he got richer. So maybe there's a story here too, but that's not for me to judge. So, because leisure with dignity, what I mentioned, it's ultimately the idea that another economy is possible. Yeah. And that is an oikonomia, an nomos of the oikos, where there are no crises. There are no boom and bust cycles because banks just hand out loans for asset inflation, as we're going through once more again now and have done so for hundreds of years now at this point. They're totally unproductive loans that inflate assets on purpose in order to create bubbles that burst and weaken the economies. So another economy is possible, totally outside the false dialectics between capitalism and socialism. It's relevant. But we need to heed the memory of Scolaire, of Otium first again. And this is what this course addresses. So again, use the coupon code 20K, simple, and take off 20% any course, but only until this Sunday. So for example, Leisure with Dignity is right here. This course invites you to think after another way of being human. Yeah. The fundamental question is the question for Scolaire is ultimately an economic question, but not in this fraudulent sense of the fake science of macroeconomics. Ricardian. Did you know that Karl Marx was a Ricardian? Coincidence? All right. Now, for all you Heidegger readers, perhaps the course on Heidegger on death and being should be of interest. Again, if you have a question, leave a super chat and I'll get to you in the end. All other questions will be ignored. Heidegger, the question of being, on being, human, death, techniques, poetry, and time. This is based on my book on Heidegger, which is this one here, which you can buy from Springer. Heidegger on Death and Being, an answer to the Seinsfrage. The course itself comes in 4 parts. We begin with being and time. And he begins with being in time. We begin with being in time, as did Heidegger. We then move on to, in the course, to the Ereignis, Ernouning. From there on, we go to techniques, the question concerning technology, building, dwelling, thinking, and the thing, and of course, in the end, also the role of poetry and of language more broadly speaking. And so, again, the coupon code works for this one as well. Here's the link to enroll, actually. is right here. And if you look at the structure of the course as much as the structure of my book, it is built on and away from, or takes its lead from, Heidegger's thinking path and sort of the four pillars, if you like, that arise from out of his thinking. And this will give you more than an in-depth introduction into the thinking path, with several attempts really to retranslate Heidegger and many of the fundamental terms that have been mistranslated. For example, the so-called essence of technology. Heidegger does not speak of the essence of technology. He instead, if we try to say this in English, we have to say the realm of technics, not the essence of technology. There's no essentialism in Heidegger. And to speak of an essence, by the way, in philosophy only makes sense if we have a definition, again, as in a specifier. So that's this course. Again, if you want to take advantage of the thank you sale, as it were, then you have to sign up now, because this coupon is valid until Sunday. But maybe you want to begin, speaking of Heidegger, with being in time. And there is, of course, a course on being in time that I taught now 2.5 years ago. And so here is that course. Can you have a question or a comment? Leave a super chat and I'll read it in the end. No super chat, I won't read it. And I won't even see it. That's the other issue. So Heidegger's being in time in this course is, we go through the work really slowly here, and we take our time, again, because what I'm trying to do is 24 lectures. Some of them long, some of them short. But in 24 lectures, they guide you, and there's handouts as well. So it's really the course is structured in a manner that allows you to read through the book on your own with some serious guidance. The recommendation is that you read a certain part on your own, and of course you read it in order, because it's a developmental book. It builds on every section. And after you've done the reading on your own and you've taken handwritten notes, handwritten with actual physical paper, that's when you start listening to the lectures and maybe go over the handouts. And then you start thinking through the text on your own. So there's 24 lectures, more than 12 hours of video. And of course, there's also audio files if you'd rather just listen. And you can download the lecture handouts that summarize some of the, most important, I wouldn't want to say concepts, because they're not really concepts. I'll just say concepts for ease of understanding. So head over there now. There's payment plans and everything else. And again, 20% off now. And if you'd like to learn about German idealism, perhaps the introduction to German idealism is what you're looking for. So this is this one here. 1 second. German idealism is, in some sense, culmination of Occidental thought as much as a rebirth of the Greek spirit in the German spirit, frankly. And however, at the same time, it's not just a retrievance or some epigonal renaissance, but built on the most radical revolution that philosophy ever saw, and that is Immanuel Kant. I also have a course on Immanuel Kant, so you could take, as many people do, by the way, they take both together. So they go through the German idealism course first, and then go into the course on Kant's critiques, which focuses mainly on the critique of pure reason. And there's also a couple of lectures on the critique of practical reason and the critique of judgment. But I make very strong in both courses that Kant is a revolutionary, not just self-proclaimed with the Copernican revolution, but that it is in fact a revolution in thinking hitherto unseen. He changes how we think radically. And if you if you hear someone or read someone saying that Kant wrote an epistemology with the critique of pure reason, close the book and burn it, is useless. It's not true. It's not an epistemology. Transcendental idealism is not an epistemology. It's a complete reversal of thinking, and it's the first time that logic is transformed, is no longer just an organon or a tool or an exercise, but is in fact raised to primacy over thinking, and not just overthinking, over how we access the world. So what Kant does is push aside the metaphysical question of what things are in themselves, let's say, and radically state that the categories of the mind don't just shape but form the objectivity of objects in their representationality, let's say. And thereby objects without contradiction are generated. Yeah? And everything after Kant, be that Schelling, who you see here, Fichte is, by the way, also part of this course as well, but especially Schelling and Hegel try to overcome in their own ways the Kantian predicament almost, because there's a high price that we pay for what Kant did. On the one hand, it allows us to do, let's say, science, but on the other hand, so he basically justifies science, but on the other hand, we are now out of access to what things really are. So you'll also just understand, for example, phenomenology, speaking of Heidegger, the return to things as they are in themselves, or as how they show themselves, if you have gone through Kant at least to some degree. So German idealism, this course is a really good introduction to the revolution that begins with Kant and continues in different ways, and the attempt to get back into nature then after Kant by Schelling and Hegel and Hölderlin, and not so much Fichte. For Fichte, actually, not at all. So, thank you. Again, this is the coupon code, is this one. 20K. Should be very easy to use. And here he is. Now this I can see. Thank you so much, Harris. Harris writes, congratulations on reaching 20,000 subscribers. Onward with the work. Onward and upwards, sir. Thank you. Oh, and thank you very much for, I can see this now, for gifting the gifting the memberships here. So thank you again for your generosity, Harris, as always. And I hope that some of you will stick around after the gift is over. Yeah, do subscribe. Do become a member of the channel. There's currently a video that I recorded a couple of days ago on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a really fantastic work that I only just read now for the first time. And thank you, Harris. So I recommend reading it. I've been very taken by it. It took her to criticize the romantic dream. It was her husband, no less, who said, Percy, who said that the poet is now to be the legislator of the world and basically create the world in his image. Well, Frankenstein was such a romantic poet in a sense. So it is a warning against the power of the imagination. Here, of course, we shall not forget. And there are two more by Professor John Vervaeke, who I'm glad to be able to call not only, but also a friend. John taught this course 2 years ago in summer 2023, around the same time now we began, I think. It was 8 lectures. It was his first foray into online teaching in this capacity. And Beyond Nihilism should be understood as a philosophical continuation of his series Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So if you're interested to learn more about what John sees, understands as the meaning crisis, but also how to go beyond nihilism and how he understands nihilism in a nihilism in a really philosophical way, then this course is for you. We read together Tillich, Stanley Rosen on nihilism, Nishitani Keiji. So the Kyoto School will also be present, the self-overcoming of nihilism, I should say. And of course, also DC Schindler, who I think has now been on his channel, if I'm not mistaken. And that final 2 lectures are on Schindler's book, Love and the Postmodern Predicament. So it's 8 lectures and in total. And so we should you should, if you are interested in John Vervaeke's work and his development, how he continued the Meaning Crisis series afterwards, then you should take this course, really. And now is the best time because there's a coupon. All right, what else can I show you? Well, if you read German, if you know German, then Sebastian Ostrich's course on Hegel, which is based on his book. So this is an introductory course to Hegel. It's more than an introduction because Sebastian is a grand master, a grand wizard of Hegel. So the course really goes in depth. It's based on his book, Hegel, the World Philosopher, but it's in German. So if you read German, maybe if you are German, then just head over here and get his course on Hegel. Now, should we mention Plato? Of course we should. A few years ago, actually almost 2 years ago now, I went to Athens for the first time. You can see me here standing, not standing, sitting on my with a view of the Acropolis. I filmed the lectures in Athens in on this terrace in my apartment there, and also one of the lectures I filmed for Plato in Delphi, and that's the final lecture on book 10 on the myth of and Delphi helps me perhaps understand the myth of a bit better. Or not understand is the wrong word. Stand in it. Be taken in by it. But anamnesis is real. That much I can say after going to Athens for the first time, after reading Plato and so many others for so many years. So these are 10 lectures in total, 10 books, 10 lectures. We do cover every book, almost all aspects of as much as that's possible, of course, but let's say the most important aspects. I don't so much focus on who gets to do what, you get to be a cleaner over here and do this and the other. But almost everything, I would say, is present in the course. So I invite you to this. You can see, actually, if you scroll down, you see the entire curriculum and also the length of the lectures. All right. What else do we have? Or maybe I should share the link. So this is... Okay. What else do we have? Oh, yeah. So the Intellectual Life course is a unique course, I would say. Wouldn't want to praise myself for it, but I think it is. Because what this course does is it brings together my experience of building a digital first school and what it means to try and live a flourishing life of the mind in, not despite, not resisting, not cynically or as Vervaeke sometimes points out, in a performative contradiction. I could be sitting here yelling at a cloud and complain about the evils of technology and do this and transmit this through to you on YouTube of all places. And so instead, what this course does is it brings together, and you can listen to the introductory video that might help. There are 30 video essays. So this is really about listening and trying to build your own life of the mind in the burgeoning hyper-digital age. And the leitmotif is, of course, as for everything that I do, is learn only in order to create. This is what Schelling said during his lecture course on university studies, what it means to study at a university. And one second. And Schelling, very, a lecture course like this today is impossible. If you proposed this to a department administrator, they would probably call the nice people with the funny jackets and have you sectioned. How dare you? How dare you try and think about what it means to learn and what it means to teach and how a university should organize itself? We know these things. It's a printing mill for degrees, and it's a glorified real estate empire. That's what a university is. We own all this land and we make it productive by having customers on site. Yeah, it's an ingenious way of using double bookkeeping for your own means. So the university is dead, good riddance. But what isn't dead is the life of the mind. If you learn in order to create, that means that what you read is, for example, is already geared towards you creating something of your own. You are not supposed to regurgitate. You're not supposed to get a grade or a mark. You're not supposed to get a degree. No, you're supposed to become creative. The hope was that the university could be this place. You can see this when you read Humboldt and Schelling and others. Now, the university itself will never be the, in this manner, will never be the place, but there is a place for the university. It has to be outside the official institution that names itself university and is not deserving of that name. So, Schelling will be mentioned. We're going to go over, I'll show you a few of the videos here, perhaps just the title. So what is the intellectual life first? We have to clarify that. Why do I think that curiosity kills? Neugier is the German word, by the way. So the greed for something new. And if you're just jumping in now, use the coupon code 20K to get 20% off any course until Sunday, okay? So head over to the Intellectual Life course. So why do I think that curiosity kills? I think it kills because you spread yourself thin. If you're just trying to follow any new trend, that's how you get distracted. It's not so much, you could of course say it's the algorithms, etc., etc. But if you've got focus on what it is that you have to do and what your project is, then it won't distract you that much. In some sense, distraction can be used almost to your advantage, and I'll go into this as well, but never be greedy for something new. Especially in philosophy, it's the same questions, the same old principles. We also want to understand, though, what the digital age even is. What is digital? So I go into this as well. What does it mean to exit Plato's cave? What is Plato's cave in the digital age? What's the hyperreal and the hyperdigital? So if you visit in Baudrillard and media theory, that's a bit in there as well. But then also there's a bit practical aspect, what's your medium? So you have to choose one medium, as I say, and then you focus on that, for example, video. But if you want to make good videos, then you also have to be a good writer. So this all comes together, really, but you have to start focusing. And then we're going to go over certain, how to cultivate certain intellectual habits. One very important habit is eating. And Kant was adamant about how important eating was, how to eat, when to eat, what to eat, to be a slow eater, not to eat too late. And Kant describes something that every single intellectual, scholar, academic knows, or writer, creative, etc., is that we often work in bursts. We get consumed by our writing project or consumed by something we need to pursue now. If we forget eating, then at some point we crash and eat too much, maybe late at night. Every student knows of this, and Kant is very aware of it, of course, and warns against it and has good tips, really good advice on how to eat and what to eat, etc. So this, I would recommend you just, to cultivate certain habits and virtues, so that, to use the Greek word arete, so that you become a unified self again. Arete means unification, not virtue actually, but unification. If you're interested in this, by the way, I would recommend my book Eudaimonia, which I understand as the familiarity, or I don't know if you can see this, the familiarity of the world. Is available on Amazon in most countries. It's a beautiful hardbook cover. You can see here Apollo dancing with the Muses. And I would like to also encourage you to read this book, and maybe also take my course on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And then just briefly to mention, we are going to go, of course, over Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Eckhart, and Nicholas of Cusa, Kant again, Humboldt, Schiller, Schelling, and Nietzsche, Emerson, Pierre Hadot on spiritual exercises, and Heidegger on releasement. So 30 video essays on how to also use technology that you advance. One of the sad things is that we use technology for the absolute worst things, like gossip or asking ChatGPT about your quote-unquote life problems, or making silly TikTok videos. Instead, we should all start thinking about how to reach the next level with what is now available. And that always also includes a certain need to negate what is available. So head over to the Halcyon website. If you have questions, you have to speak now. You have to send a super chat, and then I can respond to them, because then I see them. But if you already know which course you'd like to take, or which, for example, the course on German idealism and Kant, those two go together really well. And also, if or perhaps the course on Plato and Aristotle, those go together also really well. Plato's Politeia and Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And also, of course, the intellectual life course that I just went over. Yeah. There's a lot of courses. There's a course on the philosophy of the machine, the philosophy of power. There's a course on Spengler's Decline of the West. We've been able to publish them again. We had to take them down for a bit because the platform was limiting the amount of courses, but now we've been able to publish it again. There's a course on Nishitani's Religion and Nothingness. There's a course on Nietzsche. Maybe I should mention this. If you're interested in the more spiritual side of Nietzsche, in the more, perhaps more esoteric side of Nietzsche, and to go into some of his, you go into his, so I go into his posthumously published notebooks and translate some of it, which at the time when I did the course, which was 5 years ago, many of those hadn't been available yet. And I have to say the translations are not very good. that are now available. And they're not complete either. And I'm not even sure what sort of order they use, and it's not really good anyway. So if you're interested in the eternal recurrence of the same, the will to power, the death of God, the birth of tragedy, and also what Nietzsche means by nihilism, really, and how nihilism is the future, as he says, is the history of the next 200 years. And we are living already in the middle of it. What he means by the uncanny guess and whence it comes, how to take seriously the death of God, and maybe also how to overcome it, what the Übermensch is, or who the Übermensch is, the overman, not the transhuman. The last man wants to be transhuman. The overman wants to overcome himself and has to overcome himself. That's his role. So there's a course on Nishitani as well. I mentioned this before. There's also, if you're interested in more Eastern philosophy, there's John Vervaeke's wonderful course Beyond Nihilism, which is a continuation of his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. And that course addresses Nishitani as well, Nishitani Kiji. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening. There's Seraphim. I wave hello. Hi, Seraphim. As I remember, you were in the Aristotle course. And it's striking. Seraphim says Arete as unity in one's identity. Now that makes so much more sense than translating it as virtue. It's funny because so if you read, well, thank you very much, first of all. If you read Machiavelli, in his the Il Principe, the prince, he uses the word virtù to describe Cesare Borgia, virtue. Now, I'm not sure that we would necessarily consider Cesare Borgia to be a virtuous man in the way we usually understand the word virtue. But virtue means strength, force, a certain power, a certain capacity to enact your will in the world. Now, that's not so much. So, yes, arete can also mean bravery, etc. I'm aware of this. But it's funny because while I was writing Eudaimonia, which is out on Amazon, and I hope you can get it, even just because it looks so good. It's beautiful inside and out. Hegel was right. Kierkegaard is always wrong. And while I was reading, working on this, and I had already established for myself this translation of arete as unity, unification, etc. I'm looking for a book here. I was reading at the same time. I was reading Werner Jaeger's Paideia for the first time. Around that time, I had been aware of the book for a few years, and Jaeger is one of the few who's accepted on the continent and also in America. So it's easier these days to get the English translation than the original German, at least if you want to print it. So I was reading Jaeger at the time as well, and it's striking that he translates arete as well as Vereinigung, as unification, and then goes in a different direction a bit. But he also points out that the German word Tugend is insufficient to translate arete. And that's always what's so striking, is when you translate a few words differently, what begins to happen with the Greek text. The challenge is always to challenge yourself. The challenge is not to be able to regurgitate the virtues and pretend that they are just fallen from the sky. They're the classical virtues and the classical vices. And if we just remember them, then we can all be good conservatives. No. It just shows you haven't read the books and you don't know the language. Okay. So again, thank you very much for listening. Now head over to the Halcyon page and use the coupon code 20K, kappa, car, to take 20% of any course until Sunday.